So we're going to look at the what, the who, and the when of your internet project. First one there, the what, is just talking a little bit about project scope and which activities will form part of your project. Who is going to be your internet project team, right? Which people are going to help you getting this project off the ground? And then when is all about, your timeline and your project plan. We'll show you how you can create a basic structure and an outline for your internet project plan. And then the fourth bullet point there is our bonus edition of the webinar. We'll talk a little bit about mistakes to avoid. We'll look at some common mistakes and pitfalls, and we'll talk about how you can avoid those. Pretty important. So, you've selected a new internet product. You've selected a new platform and you have purchased it. It's a great big deal, so congratulations. Now all you have to do is launch and implement this new intranet. That does sound a bit intimidating, doesn't it? Like, where do you even start? So today we're going to break it down into small and easily digestible steps. When we coach our clients through an internet setup project, we always like to kick off the project with a checklist. Checklists are great. Checklists are every project manager's favorite thing in the whole world. Why? Well, a well-designed internet project checklist, first of all, it can help you to make sure that you don't forget any critical steps in the project. It gets you thinking right from the get-go about that. Once you've filled it out, this checklist can be shared with the rest of the team. It can get everyone on the same page about what's about to happen and how it will be done. And then lastly, this checklist will have you ask the right questions at the start of the project, not when you're in the middle of it. So let's take a look at a practical example of an internet project checklist in the next couple of slides. And what I'm about to show you is a fictitious internet project, so just keep that in mind. However, the questions that you're going to see are actual questions that we ask clients who hire us to help them launch their internet. So it's a good template for you to use as well as you're starting out on your internet project. So we're going to break this checklist down by theme. And let's start with project leadership. Some questions to ask here are, who's the internet's business sponsor, right? Who is the initiator, the lead on your internet initiative? And who's going to be project managing it, scheduling all of the activities and overseeing the project on a daily basis, right? Perhaps that will be you. Is your senior team involved or aware of this project? And if not, should they be? And the answer to that one, by the way, is yes, they probably should. Next up here is content, right? One of the major things to consider for your internet, of course, is content. What's going to be on your internet and what isn't? Good questions to ask here are related to the content structure, or what we call the information architecture, as well as the amount of content that you are going to put on your new intranet. Meetings and training logistics. This will get you thinking about your users and your staff early on in the process. How many people do you have, right? What kind of training will they need? Do you have training facilities or training rooms that need to be booked or set up? And also think about people that are working off-site or in remote locations. How will you be training them and getting them up to speed? Launch planning. Now, launching an intranet is more involved than just sending people an email with their usernames and passwords, of course, right? A lot of our clients choose to do an internal marketing and communications campaign for the new intranet. They want to create some buzz and excitement about this new change that's coming. It's good to think about this early on in the process as well before you start your project, and that way you can see if you will have someone or several people who will be available to work on that aspect of the project. Now here you can see a completed version of this same checklist. Now you'll notice that one of the things we haven't covered here in this checklist is resourcing. Who's going to be your team? Who's going to be working on this internet rollout, and what are their roles going to be? We'll look at that a little bit later in the presentation, though. Okay, so you've done your checklist. Your first important question now is what? What is going to be the scope of this project? What activities do you have to accomplish to make this new intranet happen? Now, before we go any further, I wanted to let you know that in this webinar, we're assuming that you have read our Intranet Buyers Workbook white paper. It's called 10 Steps to a New Intranet. You can see it here on the screen, and it goes over 10 steps that can guide you to determine your objectives for the Intranet, all the way to purchasing a platform or a product for your new Intranet. If you haven't yet, I'd highly encourage you to give it a read. You can see there that it can be found and downloaded on our website. The link is there on the screen if you're interested in taking a peek at that. So when you sit down to define the tasks and activities that will become part of your Intranet implementation, the first thing I want to share with you is magic. I have 5 magical questions that I'm going to share with you that can help you to narrow down very concrete objectives for your Intranet, and that will help you come up with a really focused project planning approach. So here they are. Now, these questions are inspired loosely, as you can see there at the bottom, on an article that was written by Roger Martin and A.G. Lafley in Harvard Business Review, and the title of the article was 7 Steps to Strategy Making, Bringing Science to the Art of Strategy. So we're going to go through these questions one by one, and for each of them, imagine a silent on our intranet at the end of the question. The first one there, what are your objectives for your new intranet? What conditions are required for these objectives to become true is the second question. Number 3, what do I need to do to make these conditions become true? Number 4, what can get in the way of these conditions becoming true? And number 5, what can we do to mitigate these risks? So let's take a closer look here. The first question, what are your objectives? What are the goals or objectives that your team has set for this new intranet? What are the things that you wanted to achieve? You can see 2 examples here. The first one there, maybe you want to make it easier for staff in different locations to collaborate. So this is an objective that's tied to engagement. The second example there is maybe your objective is to allow staff to access information from home and from their mobile device. So the theme of this objective is more around content. That was question number 1. We've defined our objectives. Question number 2, what conditions are required for this to become true? Here we're asking ourselves what conditions or environment are needed in order to meet these objectives that you've established for your intranet. Taking those same themes there around engagement and content, we have 2 examples here of conditions that may be required for the objectives to come true. The first one, if you would like buy-in or if you would like people to be able to collaborate and be engaged, you're going to have a condition of engagement and buy-in from all of your staff, but also from your leadership team. If your objective is to have people able to access all of the content, you're going to have to make sure that the intranet is populated with relevant content, documents, and workflows. Number 3, practically, what do you need to do to meet these intranet strategy and goals? What do you need to do to make these conditions become true? So in order to get staff and leadership engaged, you want to plan for information and training sessions, engagement. In order to give staff access to all of that content from home, you will need to populate your intranet with relevant content. Number 4, this is a dangerous question. What will get in the way of these conditions becoming true? This is all about the risks, right? Think about any events, systems, or situations that may get in the way of you launching and implementing this new intranet that meets those business objectives. For example, you may have to deal with organizational content sprawl, documents that are in content that's distributed on people's computers, on file drives, on Google Drive and whatnot. Your staff may lack understanding of your new intranet. Maybe they don't know how to use it. That's a clear risk for engagement and buy-in. And the third example there is diversion of resourcing in your intranet team. That's a resourcing risk. What if the people in your intranet team don't have enough time to work on this project? So question number 5, what can we do to mitigate these risks? That's a natural 5th question. What is your plan to deal with and even to anticipate these potential setbacks in your project? And in the examples that we've been following here are a few ways that you can counter those risks. You can make sure that you prioritize all of the content that you will need to put on your intranet. You can build out a solid training plan to avoid users who don't know how to use the system. And the 3rd example there is you can plan for your team members to have dedicated time to work on the Intranet project to avoid that over-resourcing risk there. Now, the answers that you have written down for questions number 3 and question number 5, they are going to give you great insight into which activities you will need to plan for in your Intranet project plan. Next question is who, right? Who are going to be the people in your Intranet project team, and what are going to be their roles and their responsibilities? This is the people component that we left out of that initial project checklist that I showed you at the start. And it's, of course, a very important component. So we're giving it some special attention here in its own slide. Now, we have 4 questions here that can help you build your Intranet team and select people to help you with this project. The first question is all about representation, right? Which departments would you like to be represented on your Intranet team? Typically, from working with clients, we've seen that an Intranet project team has people from the IT team, usually marketing or communications, human resources, and often also senior management. And this is, if you can involve somebody from your senior team, that's definitely a bonus in terms of, getting that buy-in from your executives. Team distribution. This is just a question where you can think about where the team is located, right? Is the Intranet team all in the same office or in the same city, or are they distributed across different cities, locations, and time zones? That sometimes happens. So if that's the case for you, it's just good to recognize them and acknowledge that when you build your team. Resourcing, so like we saw there, that can be a risk in your project, right? Does everyone in the team have dedicated time to work on this project, or are they working on other projects at the same time? And what amount of time will people have to work on it? Lastly, accountability, right? Who is leading the project? Who is ultimately accountable for driving this home? Those are 4 things that when you sit down to plan your Intranet team and invite people to work with you on this, those are all 4 considerations that you can ask yourself. We also recommend our clients come up with an Intranet RACI Matrix from the get-go. Now, what is a RACI Matrix? It's a neat tool that you can use to clearly define the roles and responsibilities in a team. So you can see the definition here on the screen. A RACI matrix describes the participation by various roles in completing tasks or deliverables for a project or a business process. Now, by creating a RACI, and we'll take a look at a practical example in a bit, you can avoid any confusion over those roles and those responsibilities during the project. Because without clearly defined roles, it's easy for projects to run into trouble when people don't know exactly what is expected of them, or when they do know what is expected of them. It's easier for them to complete their work on time, within budget, and also to the right level of quality. Now, the name RACI is an acronym. It stands for those 4 roles that you see here on the screen: responsible, accountable, consulted, and informed. The first one there, responsible, this is a person who does the work to achieve a task. They have the responsibility for getting the work done. As a general rule, this is usually one person, for example, a business analyst, a project manager, a developer, a graphic designer. They're the people who do the work to achieve a task. The accountable role, this is the person who is accountable for the task at hand. It's usually one person, and it's often the Intranet business owner or the project sponsor. This is the role that is accountable for the work and that approves the work that is being done. Consultant, these are the people who provide you with information for the project and with whom you have a 2-way communication line. There are usually several people, often subject matter experts, in your internet project, for example, your human resources staff or your IT support engineers may form part of your RACI as consultant project members. And then lastly, informed. These are the people who are kept informed about the progress of the project, and you usually have sort of a one-way communication with them. These are the people that are affected by the outcome of the tasks, and they need to be kept up to date of what's going on. So here's an example. Let's take a look at this RACI, this Intranet RACI chart for a fictitious company. And now you can see how it sort of looks in real life. On the horizontal line there, you can see the different stages of the Intranet life cycle, right? First, you define your objectives and you set direction. Next, you work on the implementation of your Intranet. And in the third phase, review contains everything from reporting on internet performance and working on continued improvement of your internet. On the vertical line then, in the rows of the matrix, you're going to define the level of hands-on work. So in row 1, which is called steer, that's more of the visionary strategic thinking work that happens there. In row 2, manage, we're getting a little bit more hands-on. In this level, we're working on concrete planning and resourcing. And row 3, execute, is super hands-on, right? Here we are doing things. We're executing on the goals and the plans that were set out in the steer and manage phases. Now, based on the horizontal and the vertical axes in this matrix, we've come up with 9 different tasks or activities related to this fictitious organization's intranet. And for each of these tasks, as you can see here, we've defined the people that are responsible, accountable, consulted, and informed. That's what that can look like in real life. And of course, this is a fictitious example, like I said. Now, when you plan out your RACI, your Intranet RACI matrix, spend a few extra minutes to map out for ongoing improvement and touch points. Again, in the same fictitious example, ongoing meetings and review touch points have been mapped out here. You can see that there's bi-weekly meetings happening with the core team, and the intranet is also an agenda item on a quarterly team meeting, as well as the management and operations meeting that happens every quarter. Ongoing reviews, tweaks, and improvements are so important in your intranet success, so plan for them from the get-go. When you now know which steps need to be taken to bring your intranet off the ground. You also know who are the people that are going to be helping you to make that happen. You've defined it in the previous steps. Now, what does your timeline look like? When do you want to launch your intranet, and how about people's availability and other commitments? Let's talk about timeline and scheduling. Now, this really means how much time are you going to set aside for this project, and what is going to be your target intranet launch date? And the timeline that you're going to come up with will depend on a couple of different factors that you can see here on the screen. First of all, you want to take a look at what your launch will look like, right? What is going to be your approach? Are you going to do a full blast launch where you launch the intranet to everybody in the company on the same day? Or do you want to take more of a phased launch approach with maybe a pilot phase before you open it up to the rest of the company? That will affect your timeline. Secondly, what's the size of your intranet team? This will be important as well for your timeline, right? If it's you and one other person who are able to work on that, your timeline is going to be a lot longer than if you were to have a team of 4 to 6 people to work with you. Bandwidth of your intranet team. What are people working on? What's their bandwidth? Will they have full-time availability to work with you on this, or do they have other priorities that they need to work on as well? What percentage of their time are they able to work on this? This as well will affect your timeline, will affect how fast these activities can be completed. Now, the fourth and fifth items here really have to do with your target launch date. The first one there, significant company events. Is there an important company event that you can tie your launch date to make it feel more organic? For example, we've seen some companies who chose to launch their intranet on a date that a merger was happening in the company, or on a day that the yearly town hall meeting was scheduled. Is there some sort of an important date that you can tie this into? And then lastly, and this is pretty obvious, do you have a hard stop date on a previous internet system, right? For example, if your previous internet tool, if you had one before, if it's going to become obsolete on December 31st, then it's pretty obvious that your target date to launch your new internet will have to be before that time. All right, in this next part, I'm going to briefly take you through some activities that typically form part of an intranet setup project, and I'll present them in a more or less chronological order. Content inventory is the first one. This is where it all starts with content inventory. And what you want to do here is take an inventory of all of the content that you have right now that is shared among your staff. It can be content that lives on a previous intranet, on people's computers, on Google Drives and forms and PDFs on a file drive, anywhere. The idea here is that you first make a complete inventory of all of the content that you currently have, and then you go through it line by line and decide which content will go on the new intranet, so will have to be migrated on the new intranet, and which content can be archived or deleted. Now, as you can see here on the screen, we do have a content inventory template available for download on our website. It's an Excel spreadsheet with some instructions that guide you through the process. So you're more than welcome to grab that and start using it. After you've made an inventory of all of your content, the next step is usually to start working on your IA design or information architecture design. This is where you plan and design the structure of the content on the new intranet, right? This is where you establish what your navigation is going to look like. An example is here on the screen. What is that structure going to look like? And next up, we have branding. So here you're going to define the look and feel of your intranet. Part of your intranet branding can be coming up with a name for your intranet and work on logos if that's something you want to do for your new intranet name, as well as defining a color guide. You can see a few examples here of intranet brands, existing real-life internet brands from our Thought Farmer clients that are up on the slide. And all three of them, as you can see, have chosen a unique name for their intranet: Life, The Loop, and then Watson on the very right. Content migration. This is the legwork that's happening here. So you're now taking your current content that you've identified in step 1 there during the content inventory, and now that you've defined the structure for your new intranet, the information architecture, you're going to migrate all of your content into your new intranet. This activity means a lot of manual work, and usually along with that initial content inventory activity, the content migration takes up the most effort in terms of hours inside your intranet project. Next up, something more fun than content migration: launch and communications planning. This is an important part of your internet implementation. This is where you plan and you produce and execute your launch and communications strategy for the internet. How are you going to announce it to staff? How are people going to be trained? Will you coordinate some mini campaigns that lead up to the launch date to get people excited? All of that is decided in that launch planning activity. And then tied to launch and communication, of course, training. So your training activities, your internet training can happen at different stages of your project, right? As you will likely have different kinds of users to train. You may have administrators that, people who are going to be managing the internet. They usually need to be trained fairly early on in the process, so they know all of the tools that they have to administrate and set up this internet. Your champion users or content owners, usually people who are going to be helping you with content migration, that big, huge task. Those people need to be trained up fairly soon in the process as well. And you're usually going to give them more of an advanced or an in-depth training than the rest of your staff. The rest of your staff is typically trained, or at least that's what we've seen with our clients, after the internet is launched. You can organize a series of training sessions or lunch and learns where staff can attend and learn how to use this new internet. And then the last activity that we're highlighting here, performance measurement planning. This is important to think about as well, right? How are you going to measure how your intranet is doing after you launch? How will you tell if it's successful? It's worthwhile to define the key measurements that you want to keep track of on an ongoing basis and set up the right measurement tools for it, right? So you'll be able to report on them. Now, unfortunately, I don't have enough time today to go into more detail here, because guys, we could do a whole separate webinar just on this topic here and how to tackle this task. But it's good to be aware of this activity, and you can always read more on our website about how, what are some strategies to make that happen. How long will it take? So we've looked at all of these activities now, and what I'm going to do now is just give you some approximate time estimates. They are approximate, they're just based on our experience with working with clients on all of these things, but they will possibly and even likely be different in your project. Content inventory typically takes up at least a couple of weeks. 2 to 4 weeks would be the average that we're looking at there. Your information architecture design, so the navigation structure for the intranet, 2 to 3 weeks usually is what we've seen clients do there. Your branding for your intranet can take 1 to 2 weeks. Content migration, you can see this is where the legwork happens, 4 to 6 weeks. That is usually the most time-consuming activity of your intranet project. Launch and communication planning, that takes up about 1 week. Training, very important as well. In total, usually 1 to 2 weeks to get everybody trained up. And then performance measurement planning, depending on how far you take that, we're estimating 2 to 3 days for completing that task. Now, some of these activities, of course, they don't have to be completely linear. There can be some overlap in between, for example, doing the information architecture design and the branding. Now, insider project planning tip. These are just some words that I want to share. Words of project management wisdom, as spoken by our own Jessica Evans, who runs all of the projects here at project services here at Open Road. And her advice is, when you draft your project plan, break all of the activities down in tasks that each take no longer or take no less than 2 hours and no more than 2 days. Thank you, Jessica. Those are wise words. All right, we've talked about timeline. We've talked about activities, which activities to include and how much time and effort they approximately take. Now let's check out some examples of intranet project plans. All right, so the one that you see here is a project plan for an intranet that's drafted in Excel format. You can expect a similar project plan layout if you use Microsoft Project Plan, or OmniPlan for Mac is a similar tool. Now, this is fairly detailed with all of the activities laid out here in the left column, along with the duration of the activity and an effort estimate. There are activities planned start and finish dates, and then in the last column on the right, the people and resources that will be completing all of those activities. Another example here is using a calendar layout. What you're seeing here is actually a ThoughtFarmer calendar page. When we assist our customers with building a project schedule for their intranet implementation, we like to set it up in ThoughtFarmer in the calendar view. This provides a really visual way to display all of the different tasks and activities, as well as the duration of each activity and any time overlap that's happening. So this particular project, again, completely fictitious, spans over the months of September 2014 and October 2014, as you can see here. Now, one thing I would like to emphasize is that there really is no one-size-fits-all project plan for launching the intranet, right? There are definitely common themes like content strategy, branding, training, communications planning. All of those elements will be there, but a lot will depend on your unique intranet strategy and objectives. And it will depend as well on your launch target dates, on the amount of content that you have to migrate, and also on, like I said before, on the available bandwidth that your project team members will have. Okay, the last part of our presentation, but an important one, common mistakes you may be tempted to make when you're planning an internet project, and more importantly, how to avoid them. My first piece of advice, don't wing it. Don't wing something as important as planning your new company-wide internet rollout. Setting up an intranet involves lots of different teams, lots of different people, lots of different opinions, and potentially even politics, right? So being aware of that fact is an amazing step one, but then taking the time to sit down, to set your timeline, to gather your team, to plan all of your activities on the journey, it's not a luxury. It really is going to be a condition of your internet success. Indecisiveness. That's another one that we sometimes see in projects that happen in projects, and sometimes it's roadblocks happen, and it can really mess with the momentum of your project. Not to mention with your timelines and target dates. Now it's easy to get stuck on a particular choice or decision that you need to make along the way, but don't be afraid though to make decisions. Right? If your team is stuck on a particular part of the internet project, say for example, the name of the new intranet or the main color that should be used in your design, don't be afraid as a project leader to take control and to guide your team to bite the bullet and come up with a decision or a compromise that works for everyone. Content migration. And first of all, guys, I just have to say, I was so proud when I found this slide, like the image and the joke behind it. It's geese that are migrating. It's content migration. So I just really wanted to point that out and make sure that everybody got the joke because I was just so proud of myself for that. It's geese and they're migrating. Anyway, hopefully that makes the subject of content migration a little bit more interesting as well, because content migration is one of the less glamorous parts of setting up your new internet. It takes a lot of effort and a lot of time to do well. But if there's one thing that we've learned over the years, it's that, unglamorous as it may be, making sure the right content is on your internet for launch is crucial, right? Don't rush your content migration and certainly don't skip it. Like I said, most of our clients take 4 to 6 weeks to migrate all of their content, sometimes longer. It really depends on the nature of your content and, of course, on its volume. Tunnel vision is our fourth common pitfall here. Sometimes it's easy to get stuck on one particular aspect of the project, but as the person leading the internet project, try to take a holistic approach. Don't focus only on content. Don't focus only on the look and feel. Don't focus only on your launch party, right? Delegate where possible. So zoom out and keep the big picture in mind. If you look at the slide here and you see that amazing sunset in the distance, think of that as your new internet, launched and loved and completely amazing. That's the picture you want to have in your mind. Non-iterative approach. An internet project doesn't end when you launch it, right? Launching your internet is fun and it's exciting and it's a great accomplishment. You definitely should give yourself a pat on the shoulder. But the work doesn't end there. Your internet is not carved in stone, right? It's always a work in progress. Remember those recurring meetings we talked about earlier when we were reviewing the Intranet RACI? It's a big deal. A successful intranet is an intranet that is reviewed regularly, that is monitored, adjusted, and improved upon along the way. It's very important. Now, what I've given you today is a bit of an overview and a starting point. If you want to learn more about internet implementations and read about all of the different activities that we've talked about, you can do that on our website, thoughtfarmer.com, in the area that is called Intranets 101. There's a wealth of information there and reading material that will help you well along your way on this new project. So to conclude the presentation, these are just my last words of wisdom. The end of your project is only the beginning. So good luck to everyone. And thank you as well, because that was the end of my presentation.
Thank you so much, Caroline. And so for everyone who's on the webinar, if you just want to, if you have any questions for Caroline, I know I was actually writing some questions down as we went, and then you managed to pretty much answer all of them by the end of the webinar. But if for anyone else, if you have any questions that you would like to know from Caroline, just type them in the box on the right hand of your screen. If you just look at the little GoToWebinar panel, there's a little pop-out questions box. And Caroline, we have one that's come in already. So this one is from Michelle, and Michelle asks, regarding the timeframes you noted, are these based on having a dedicated intranet team?
That is a good question. And I would say that yes, they are. What I've highlighted here in the presentation would definitely sort of assume that you have somebody or some buddies who are working with you and who have really dedicated some of their time to work on this project. Like I said there, if it's just you, and this sometimes happens, we do see, especially with smaller companies, we do see clients where there's one person really tasked with the entire implementation. You're definitely going to see those tasks usually become a little bit longer in time estimate. Let me just go back here to that slide. There we go. So yes, what you see here is just assume here that you have a team that has some representations from different divisions that are able to work on the different aspects of the of all of these activities. If it's just you, then these may definitely take a little bit longer.
Great. I actually just had a question just to clarify with setting up your intranet team as well. And I know we talked about the RACI Matrix before. What department normally owns the intranet, or which, just to clarify for people, who are the actual people who are normally on the intranet team and what are their job titles?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think what we've seen just from our client base is that an internet project typically is led by somebody from the communications team, internal communications potentially. So those would typically the people who are the project leads or that business owner or sponsor that we talked about. But then most clients have sort of work with people from, first of all, from the IT department. There will be somebody in the team that helps out around all of that. If you select a new tool, a new software tool, people need to have access to it, potentially need to get another login, need it installed in their system. So having a clear role in IT that you can talk to is important. Sometimes we also see people from human resources. They are typically involved as well, just because the internet becomes part of sort of like employee onboarding and exiting and all of those things. The internet is usually very involved in those aspects of the company's business processes. So I would say that those are sort of the three key roles that we typically see, that people that are very involved in internet projects: IT, communications, and more specifically internal communications, and human resources.
Great. And how big of a company would you say requires a dedicated intranet manager?
That's a good question. That is a really good question. Oh, it's so hard though, right? I think just going by my experience, the companies or the clients where I see one person who really has a title of internet manager and who makes it their full-time job, I would say are companies that have about 500 or more employees.
Okay,
And that is
perfect.
really just an approximation there, but that's
Right,
sort of
of
what I
course.
believe.
Okay, great. There's a bunch of other questions that have come in here, so I'm gonna just move a little bit forward. We have one here from Robin that asks, what number of pages of an intranet site are your average times taken from? So I think what she's trying to clarify is the size of how much content are you migrating if it's taking 4 to 6 weeks?
Yes, that's a good question. And like I said there too, it's, a lot of it depends on how much content you have. Excuse me, we had one client in the recent past who came to us with it was somewhere along the 100,000 pieces of content that they had, documents that they need to migrate into their new intranet. That took weeks, right? I think they were around 8 weeks of migrating, like solidly migrating content every day and having people that worked on that for, 50% of their time. Um, the number of pages that would take 4 to 6 weeks is difficult to say. It depends on the size of your company as well. But if I had to put a number on it, I'm not super comfortable putting a number on it, but I would say anywhere between, you know, 1,000 to 1,500 pages of content is likely going to take 4 to 6 weeks. Remember, you're not only copy pasting, but what you're doing there too is making sure that that content is migrated into the right spot, it takes the right format, it's set up with the right metadata and all of those kind of things. That said, if you're a small company, you're starting out and you don't have that much content, then maybe your content migration phase takes a lot less. Maybe it only takes 1 to 2 weeks. Really the idea here is to acknowledge that it needs to happen and to sort of assess what content you have and what maybe it doesn't need to be migrated all of it into the new system. So just to do that selection in phase one here in the content inventory. So content inventory together with content migration. Just be aware of the fact that it needs to happen and that it potentially may take a bit of time.
And you do think it would be okay, though, to do a phased approach for it?
Yeah, no, that's a good point, right? I mean, sometimes what you can do is prioritize your content. If you have a tight timeline, and you want to launch, say, you want to launch your internet on May 1st, what you can do is just look at that content inventory, select the pieces of content that are most essential or crucial for your staff, and then prioritize your content for migration that way, so that you have key content already populated on the internet when you launch, and then you can continue that content migration after launch date at a bit of a slower pace, or without that looming launch date that you have to target there.
Okay, perfect. And that actually ties the phase question. That was actually just my question, but that ties really well into one that Michelle has here. She says, what, if any, challenges or issues have you seen with taking a phased pilot approach versus a big bang type of approach?
The Big Bang approach is very powerful, right? If it's a company-wide launch, you can make it really festive, and confetti will drop out of the ceiling, and you can organize a lot of events to create that excitement around it. The perhaps sometimes a challenge with a pilot approach can be that you have only a few people who are on that intranet. What if they don't use it in the way that you had anticipated, and sort of the excitement is dying off a little bit before you're ready to launch it to your entire staff? So that can be a little bit of a risk there. On the flip side, though, if you take a phased launch approach, that can also set you up for success. Like I said, if you have more time to do it that way, you can make sure that the core team of perhaps one champion user per department, or one specific location of the office starts out with the intranet, populates the content, learns how to use it, and then you can sort of in a phased approach launch it out to other parts of your organization, and sort of deal with issues along the way and train people in sort of a more phased approach. That it can manage your timeline and your resources a lot better in that approach as well.
Perfect. Thanks. So we have a couple other questions that have come in here. Some of them may take more time than we have to answer on this webinar, so I think we can direct some of them to some other resources. But just to go through here, we have one from Lauren that asks, any examples of teaser materials available? And Lauren, I will actually take that question. We have a blog post on, if you go to the Thought Farmer blog, that has 25 intranet launch, I think it's called 25 creative intranet launch examples, that has a ton of great examples. There is also, we have a collection there of 3 different videos. You'll have to just search on the blog for Intranet launch. We have 3 clients who created videos for their launches, including one from a design firm called LPK that specializes in making videos and does in-house design work. So their video is just amazing. So I would definitely recommend taking a peek at those. Okay, let me just make sure. Yeah, so we have one here as well, Caroline, and we might just need to redirect to some other resources, but they ask, what would be a good way to train users or content owners who have a different level of technological savvy or aptitude?
That is a good question, and it also sort of depends on the platform that you're implementing there as well. I'm just gonna sneak in a shameless Thought Farmer plug here. If you were to, train all of your staff on Thought Farmer, it's such there's really is very intuitive and easy to learn. So even I would say in that case, the level of technicality or technical knowledge that people have likely wouldn't be that big of a consideration. Um, but in general, I think it's something that you could address with different types of training that you set up. Like I said there in the presentation as well, you may have your champion or advanced training for those people who are very savvy with software, who are a bit more technically inclined, who you think can sort of be an advanced user and take the software to its full potential. And then you can also schedule some basic training, some end user training, as we sometimes call it, for people to just show them the basic functionality of that intranet. How do you create a page? How do you update your profile, or those kind of things. It may be worthwhile as well, like Jill said there, to check out to see if we have we have a lot of content on the Intranet's 101 section here about training, about engaging your staff. So it may be worthwhile to read through that as well. But I think just as long as you and that's actually a great question, because you're already acknowledging that there is that different level of technical savviness, and that's the first step. I know it's a great step one. You just want to tailor your training content to those different types of users.
Great, thanks, Caroline. Just to add one tip in there as well, I know Ephraim, who used to be the internet manager at Oxfam, shared that he also post training, because you can't expect everyone to learn everything in a couple hours, right? Did internet drop-in sessions where he had snacks and provided an opportunity for people to go get additional training post rollout to really support those users who didn't have a lot of technical savvy knowledge. So I think that might be a good idea that can help as well. But yes, training is, we do have some more resources on our blog as well, because it's a topic we could spend a whole webinar on. Just a couple other questions here, Caroline. So we also have one, again, a big question. Great presentation. Could you please tell us how we should define the intranet structure? And are there any steps and questions to help us?
That's a great question. I sort of knew that was going to come up, because it's such a big topic as well, and like just the scope of the presentation didn't allow for all of it. But our approach here at Thought Farmer, when we help clients with setting up an information architecture, is very user-centered. So I should redirect you again to our website. We have a lot of amazing blog posts on starting out with an information architecture and the approach that we take there. And I think we also have a few webinars on the topic, so that may be worth checking out as well. But just in short, our approach is usually 2 steps. And what we do is we involve the people, we involve staff in setting up an intranet, an IA, or an intranet navigation. We first do something that we call a cart sort exercise, where we gather a set number of different content items that we take from that content inventory that we did there. So we grab maybe 20 or 30 content items randomly from that list, and then we ask people to sort each of those content items, documents, articles, forms, whatnot, and sort them into different piles. So categorize them. And that gives our team a great insight into how people at your organization sort of mentally model content or categorize it together. And based on that, and we have, of course, I mean, we have user experience designers here in house who help our clients then come up with that what we call information architecture or navigation structure. Um, so based on that card sort exercise, we come up with a draft version of that information architecture. And then we do a second exercise, and we call that a task testing exercise. So what we do there is we ask people, we set up this draft structure, and then we come up with a number of scenarios, a number of tasks that people have to, that you want people to accomplish on the internet. For example, find the employee events newsfeed, or find the form where you can request a day off or something like that. So we come up with a number of different scenarios. We then again involve all of the staff in this exercise and ask them to complete all of these tasks. And what we're looking for then is sort of the participants' clicking pattern, right? Where did they go in that draft navigation to find that particular item that we set up in those tasks? And based on that, again, we perform an analysis and see how that draft information architecture is performing, and then based on that we make some tweaks. This is of course a fairly advanced way of going about it. If you are doing this yourself and you don't have necessarily all of the tools to get started out with that, you can also just base it on coming up with sort of the 10 tasks that people are going to have to perform on the internet, and then making sure that those are all very easily visible and easy to get to. So sort of in a nutshell, I would definitely encourage you to read more on our blog and maybe check in on one or two of the webinars that we have on the topic, and I think those will be very enlightening for you.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Caroline. And I know we're kind of running a little bit towards the end of our time here. Just in regards to content migration, I'll just kind of add one final note on here because that seems to be, as you mentioned, the largest task. And I think the key, we do have a content inventory worksheet available on our website as well. The key with that is really looking at how much you can reduce and how much content is out of date or redundant, and the big tip there is looking at what content you can get rid of and what content you don't need. When you're doing that and kind of doing redundant, out of date content, content identification before you start migrating, so you can actually cut down probably 60 to 80% of your content for things that you won't need, or things you can also do after you get everybody trained and get them to move over their individual team content and stuff. I think particularly for people, if they have a lot of stuff in old shared drives, that can be really scary. So that can be something that you can work on as well after you get more people trained on the intranet. So any last words of wisdom, Caroline?
Oh boy, no, I should go back to the slide of Jessica and her amazing advice. There we go. When you draft your project plan, break all of the activities down in tasks that are no less than 2 hours, no more than 2 days. Amazing. Thank you, Jessica. That would be my advice as well. And yeah, don't, go in with your eyes open, I think is my major advice, right? Be prepared, be planned, be organized. That is a great place to be when you start off this project. Don't wing it.
Perfect. Thank you again so much for your time, Caroline, and sharing this. I know we had a lot of people who were new to ThoughtFormer joining today, so it's really great that you could take time from our clients and share this information with people that were interested in starting their first intranet project. I just wanted to share a couple other things with people that we have on the line today. We do have, like Caroline mentioned, a ton of online resources at thoughtformer.com/intranets101. Another thing, we have resources for people that are interested in starting an intranet project at our upcoming conference. So it's called the Thought Summit. It is May 4th to 5th. It's located in Vancouver, where our head office is as well. And it's 2 days where you can join intranet managers, social software practitioners, and enterprise thought leaders for inspiring presentations, practical advice, hands-on training, and great networking. So you can check out more information at summit.thoughtfarmer.com. So summit.thoughtfarmer.com. And we would be totally happy to have you join us. Lastly, we will be sharing this recording with you by email and on our blog within 48 hours. And if you have any follow-up questions, please feel free to get us in touch with us directly at engage, ENGAGE at thoughtfarmer.com. Thank you everyone for your time today. Take care.